Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And today we're going to be talking about the topic of the day, which is, amazingly, the people are very mad. Liberals are very mad today. Universities of higher learning are very mad today because the Trump administration just released the guidelines for foreign visas for next school year. And pursuant with the law, the Trump administration will not allow foreigners to enter the country if they're going to be going to school entirely on the internet. Now, this is common sense. If the foreign visa, the whole purpose of it is so that people can come into the United States to learn, to allow them to come into the United States when they could study and take their courses anywhere. It's an obvious violation of that visa program. So liberals are getting really pissed. We're going to play a couple clips. We're going to show a couple tweets. But it's just remarkable to me that this is what they're fighting, because like Harvard is already suing the White House over this, the Homeland Security over this. It's just incredible.
I don't actually know what the logic is behind it. If they're doing distance learning and they're actually not going to be on campus and not going to be in the classroom and they're going to suspend that, I don't know what the argument would be that we need to have those people in the United States. I don't understand. And actually, it flies in the face of the law. Every single thing that comes up is got to be a fight. Like everything. Oh, I don't like this. I don't like that. It's almost like mommy and daddy disorder, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. We're constantly having discussions about, I don't like that. I don't like that. Johnny gets to do it. I don't get to do it. It is mental midgetry. Is that even a word? I don't even know if that's
it is. Technically, yeah.
But it never is. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, let's look at logic. That makes sense. That, why would you have them fly into the United States, stay here if we're going to be under lockdown and they're going to take all their classes online?
So the way it works, is these are three specific types of visas. Primarily, they're F1 visas, and what that means is that you're coming to the United States to learn. You're not here to work. You're not here to vacation. You're here to learn. So you have to actually be learning. I don't want to dive too deep into the weeds, but we kind of have to because of why it is the way it is. But before we do that, I want to explain exactly what's going on. So we're going to play a couple clips from CNN. CNN's not happy about Homeland Security's decision to basically say that foreign students who aren't going to actually attend classes have to leave the country. So let's get a little context for this. Let's play cut one.
More than 1 million international students could be at risk of being deported after a new move by the Trump administration. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says international students pursuing degrees in the U.S. must take in-person classes. This as many universities are finalizing plans on when and how to safely return to classrooms during the pandemic. The president of Harvard University says he's concerned, warning that this, quote, undermines the thoughtful approach taken on behalf of students by so many institutions, including Harvard, to plan for continuing academic programs while balancing the health and safety challenges of the global pandemic.
So that's Harvard's position, that it undermines their goal of having a safe environment. So what the Trump administration did is the law says, and we'll explain why it says this, the law says that if you're going to be in the country on a student visa, you have to attend classes. And if you don't attend classes, like if you stop showing up or you start acting really weird or displaying some terroristic activity, the school has an obligation to report you to Homeland Security, especially if you don't show up. Because the reason that that's a requirement is because the last time it was looser,
September 11th.
We had a foreign student hijacked Flight 77 and crashed it into the Pentagon. Let's throw up image number 3. This man's name is Hani Hanjour. He was one of the hijackers on Flight 77. He crashed into the Pentagon. He was the guy in the cockpit controlling the plane. He was in the country on a student visa. He was supposed to be taking classes, I believe it was in Oakland, but it was definitely in California, to learn English. He was supposed to be in English classes. He never showed up. Instead, he was in Arizona at a flight school learning how to pilot a commercial airliner. We all know how that ended up. 158 people dead because he, instead of going there, was able to learn how to fly a plane and then hijack the airliner. So after that, the federal government, as everyone knows, we had the 9/11 Commission, where bipartisan, looking at what went wrong and how to fix it. And one of the things they identified was the fact that this pilot was in the country on a student visa, and no one knew that he was skipping out on his classes and he was in Arizona instead. So one of the requirements after that is that if you're going to come to the United States to learn, you have to have in-person classes, you have to show up for those classes, and if all of a sudden you stop showing up, the schools have to notify Homeland Security so they can search for you. Because as we saw from this case, when a foreign student just stops going to classes, there is reason to be concerned. So this policy that the left is complaining about is a national security policy put in place after 9/11 to ensure that another 9/11 doesn't happen, or at least try to prevent one.
Right.
But now they are branding this as it's xenophobic, as this is Trump trying to go after immigrants. But and again, these people aren't immigrants; they're going to have a foreign visa, a student visa, trying to go after foreigners. That it's racist, xenophobic. They actually are saying, Joe, that we need to lift post 9/11 security regulations so that 1 million foreign students can hang out in the United States next year, because they won't be doing classes; they'll just be here hanging out. That's what they're actually arguing. It's disgusting.
Well, here's my problem, and I keep telling you that everything that we're going through right now, this loony leftist agenda, is actually an infiltration of people with foreign interests that's happening overseas.
Yeah, which is why we did this, because I wanted to throw you a bone on that.
And you throw me another bone. So we are dealing with right now. And by the way, before we say that, share. Remember, we keep having this conversation. Yesterday, we had 61 people that were actually watching the show, and it showed that only 30 people or 20 people were actually watching it. We have a voice, right? And we reach millions of people every month. But Facebook and platforms like that weaponize it against this message, right? They would rather you listen to some of the illogical or the foreign-based interest environments or ideas and not hear the truth. So hit the share button. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it in groups, and then have the conversation. Then if you really want to talk to us about this issue, you feel strongly one way or another about this, you can call us at 888-441-1121. So, Max, we've talked, so hit the share button. We've talked about this, I don't know how many times, and I keep telling you that a lot of the ideas that were tested in the Middle East, in Northern Africa, in places in Asia, in Europe, those tests have then been brought to the United States, and we have this segregationist type environment that's happening on one side, and then we have foreign interests that are being protected, and we want to just ignore the law. We want to justify not using the law and allow people to come in here that frankly are going to be working online, which means they can work online anywhere. They could actually say, I'm supposed to be in California. They could be in Arizona. They could be in New York, right? And keeping track of those students, because there's no tallying and then bringing them into a classroom environment. There's no controls in place. Yet they want to sue on behalf of these foreign students, because why? Because
right now they're suing. So right now the schools are suing on behalf of themselves, saying that this is going to hurt their revenue.
Right.
There are other groups that are suing on behalf of the students, but the lawsuits that were filed are on behalf of the schools. No doubt that there will be lawsuits filed on behalf of the students. I slightly disagree with you, because as someone, you've traveled to the Middle East, you've traveled to Africa. There is nowhere on those continents, there's no country on those continents where you can just enter the country and they don't keep track of you.
Correct.
Right? You enter the
Correct.
country and you're able to do what you want. I studied
You have to
abroad
check
in Beirut.
You have to check
I
in.
studied abroad
There's
in
check-in.
Beirut. Yeah, I studied abroad in Beirut, and they went through my passport with a fine-tooth comb, searching for an Israeli stamp, right? They were looking for it. They went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I had to tell them where I was going to be. There were check-ins where they reached out to me to say, hey, are you still here? They reached out to the university I was studying at in Beirut, Lebanon, to make sure I was still there. All these countries do that. So I disagree that this idea that we just have to let everyone into the country is imported from foreign countries. This is political correctness to fatal levels.
Back it up. I'm talking about all the other policies and things that are happening here. When you start talking about foreign interests, it actually benefits those foreign interests to have their students come into the United States. So again, it's pandering. It's pandering to people that want to create policy and opportunities here in the U.S. that frankly, I mean, we're willing to put this. It comes down to the same thing we talk about with the border wall. We're willing to put foreign interests, people that are not from the United States, ahead of the interests and the safety of the people that are Americans. And that, I think, is what I was saying. So I think we talked past each other a little bit on that. But frankly, Max, when were they ever entitled? When were people entitled to come to the United States? I mean, can't we just talk about the entitlement issue? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I talked to a friend of mine. I'm not going to use her name, but a friend of mine who was a foreign student, very close friend. We went to the same college. She came into the United States on a foreign visa, and she was very passionate about this. And what she was talking about is that it violates their right to an education. Well, it just doesn't, right?
You don't have
has
a right to
enter the United States. You don't have a right to enter the United States. It's a privilege. You have to prove that you've been accepted to a college, a bona fide college, before you can get an F1 visa. And no one's denying their right to an education because they can take the classes anywhere else. Right. Saying that you have to go back home and take your online classes there, or I guess they could go to another country. We don't say they have to go home. But to say that forcing them to take online classes is depriving them of their education, that's not the United States doing. That's their college or university doing it, right? If that's a violation of their rights, go after the colleges, go after the universities, because they knew full well that this was going to happen, right? It wasn't surprising anyone. CNN's trying to make this out to be that it's this big shocking revelation from the Trump administration. I want to play the next part of this clip.
Everything is a shocking revelation. I mean, it's shocking that it's a shocking revelation because all they want to do is create noise that means nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. So just to set this clip up, the way the law works since 9/11, if you're coming into the country on a student visa, you have to go to class. And if you don't go to class, you get reported because you might be a terrorist. Very common sense stuff. The Trump administration the last semester of this last school year, put a waiver in place. Since the pandemic hit in the middle of the school year, they said, hey, if you're going online, you can stay through the end of the year. Fine. This new guidance says we're basically reverting back to the old way, but they are giving some flexibility for mixed schooling. So if you go to some online, some in class, it's fine, right? The ban on any online classes is lifted, right? But you can't go only online. But look at how CNN tries to frame this. Let's go to cut 2.
Joining me now is Ken Cuccinelli. He is the acting deputy secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and he served on the White House coronavirus task force in the early stages of the pandemic. He still sits in on meetings on a substitute basis at times. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. Help us understand what the goal is here.
Well, the current rules, the regulations that govern foreign students allow at most one online class, and so we're expanding the flexibility massively to a level never done before so that schools can use hybrid models and can design reopenings. Anything short of 100% online is a direction that we're headed. We've got to finish the temporary regulation, but this is more flexibility that we're looking at than has ever been provided before.
So they tried to frame this as the Trump administration is doing something horrible. Ken Cuccinelli, which I've met before, he's a very nice guy. He puts it completely clear, right? You can have online classes, but you cannot be totally online because you need to have a physical presence where you say you're going to be so that we can notice if you're not there. But CNN is branding that as some significant departure. They're trying to make this out to be that the Trump administration is just trying to force schools to reopen. Let's play the last bit of this interview. Let's go to cut 3.
This is now setting the rules for one semester, which we'll finalize later this month, that will again encourage schools to reopen, recognizing some of them are moving their start dates up, some of them are going to hybrid models, some online, some in person, and we're trying to accommodate as many of those as we can while maintaining the protections for fraud and so forth that are necessary in any sort of international visa program.
So you're basically forcing universities to reopen even if they have personally determined that they shouldn't be doing that for public health reasons?
We're not forcing universities to reopen. However, if a university, let's just take your version of it, if they don't reopen this semester, there isn't a reason for a person holding a student visa to be present in the country. They should go home, and then they can return when the school opens. That's what student visas are for, and we want to accommodate that for schools, and we're working hard to do that.
So we listened to that, and I cut out the bit of it because there's a lot that we've already talked about. But she completely turned it around where he's saying we're being flexible. Instead of no online classes, we went to one. Instead of one, now we're letting them have some online classes. They just can't go all online. And the CNN anchor says, so what you're saying is you're trying to force universities to reopen even though they think it's dangerous. It's propaganda. This is complete propaganda. 100%. But I wanted to show it because it's so obvious when you look at it in the context that they're just trying to spread this propaganda.
And it's and the narrative, he clearly says that there's no reason if they're not going to open that the students should stay in the United States. Where is how do you have outrage when he's talking common sense? The student visa program is here so that when you're actually attending school, you can actually be in the United States.
Yes.
If the schools aren't open, then you shouldn't be in the United States. That's pretty simple.
Yes, it is. And listen, I can understand the hardship associated with this order because when you're in a 4-year program in the United States, as long as you are enrolled and you're in what's called good status, which means that you're not going to flunk out or anything, as long as you're enrolled in the fall semester, you can stay in the United States over the summer. So that's how it currently works. But when you no longer have in-person classes in the fall, you are no longer in good status. And it's not the student's fault, it's the university's fault. The university has stopped offering in-person classes, making it impossible for the students to meet the requirements of the visa program. Again, as we mentioned in the beginning, these requirements are set in place because Hani Hanjour, one of the 9/11 terrorists, got into the country on a student visa, never showed up for classes, the government didn't know, and instead he was learning how to fly commercial airliners at a pilot school in Arizona. So the requirement that they show up for classes is to protect the country. All this talk about public health, I want to talk about national security, because saying that public health demands that we roll back national security requirements, I'm just not going to buy it. Here's the problem, though.
No, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, finish, and then I'll tell you my thoughts.
So here's the problem, though. Trump, like he always does, seems to do, got a little out ahead of his own administration officials, and he said something at his not press event, at his roundtable yesterday, that has been interpreted to suggest that this regulation is being put in place to force colleges to reopen. That's not the only reason, but he is saying that he wants universities like Harvard to reopen and that his administration is going to be very tough with that. So the left is now interpreting that to mean that this has nothing to do with national security and it's just to force universities to reopen. They're going to try and shop this into a liberal judge, probably either on the East Coast or on the West Coast, and hope that he, instead of following what DHS is saying and ICE is saying, just go off of what Trump's own comments are. Because that's what they did with the border wall. That's what they did with the travel ban. They do it with everything, right? They ignore the actual regulatory reason, and they just try and say that Trump's a racist, and that's why he's doing it. And we'll play that in a second, but go ahead. Say what you were going to say.
So we keep coming and having these conversations about this Trump derangement syndrome, this getting outraged by everything that's happening. And I just want to just for a minute, just calm the waters a little bit and just ask people a simple question. If you defund the police, who does it benefit? The criminals or the good people? Which one, Max?
Criminals.
All right, so criminals. If you allow students into the country and with an unchecked process, even if it's a policy process, so you can actually see what's happening with those students, who does it benefit? The good guys or the bad guys?
Well, so it doesn't. It only has the possibility of benefiting bad guys, but
Correct.
That's not to say that everyone in the country on a student visa is a bad guy.
I didn't say it doesn't matter.
You will benefit bad people, and you also
Right.
will benefit good people, but you're certainly not benefiting the American people. That's
Correct. And I think that's my point. Is that can't we have common sense policy that we stop this fear mongering, we stop this rhetoric, we stop the boogeyman mentality, because that's what we're doing. We're creating a boogeyman mentality, and that's what they've done the entire Trump campaign, is that they've literally allowed the deep state and these loony leftist people, which by the way are like a cancer to our society, they're a cancer to our government, they're a cancer to our communities. We've allowed them to speak, we've allowed them to talk, we've allowed them to create policy and say that, oh, we're going to redefine what it looks like to have police in our communities. Well, they already did that. They redefined it by having areas in Detroit that you can't even go. There's areas in Detroit police will not even go. They won't even police. Yeah. And now they want to assign that to every one of our communities and say, by the way, if you don't want this to happen, you're a racist. If you don't want to let a million people come into the United States and to take their online classes from their living room or in somebody else's living room or, unchecked, that you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a xenophobe, you're all of these things. No. How about you're just realistic that bad people exist? How about that? How about common sense? Can't we have some common sense?
Here's the really interesting part. After all of these weeks of the left accusing the United States of being the most racist country in the history of the world, where they claim that black people are just indiscriminately shot simply for walking down the street for no reason other than their blackness, right? This crazy things that we've heard. Now they are begging to let foreign students stay inside what they call the most racist country in the history of the world. If I was a leftist and I believed that, I would rejoice over this. They get to take online classes and they don't have to be in our country. I would rejoice if I was a leftist, right? But they want it both ways. They want to call this a horrible country, but then defend a million foreign students to give them the ability just to live here and hang out. Because that's what they'd be doing. Foreign students are not allowed to work in the United States unless it's on campus or if they're doing some training programs as part of their degree. Usually that's for like psychology and medical students, but there are training programs they can work in. The only way for them to earn an income is to work on campus in dining halls or as secretaries, whatever. They can't do that if the campuses are closed. So you're talking about having people just live here for a year, no actual reason for them to be here, no ability for them to earn a living, right? If they had on-campus housing, they're not going to have that housing, so they're going to have to find housing somewhere else, right? Can they afford it? Who knows? Can they afford to eat if they're not having subsidized on-campus dining? Who knows, right? There's lots of very serious questions because every single one of them has to testify and swear upon entering the United States that they have enough resources to take care of themselves. They're not going to become a public charge. That oath that they took goes out the window when they're forced to just live here without any resources from the school they're supposed to be living at. So there's lots of really, really big complications to this. It's a lot more messy than the left is making out. But I want to play that clip of Trump yesterday at his press event because this is what he said, and the media is trying to make this out to be proof that this is just an attack on foreigners. Let's go to cut 4.
I see where Harvard announced that they're closing for the season or for the year. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's an easy way out, and I think they ought to be ashamed of themselves. You want to know the truth. But I noticed that today, and probably others are doing that. That's called the easy way out. I don't know if people are helping them. I guess their endowment's plenty big. They don't have any problem with that. But that's not what we want to do because it's very important, as so many of the parents and instructors said today. It's so important that the children at this age, especially, that they're together on campus. And that's what we're striving for, and we're going to be very strong on that. We're going to be very, very powerful in that view. We want our schools open in the fall.
So because he said he wants the schools open, because he says it's the position of his administration that is preferable to have students on campus. The left is trying to twist that statement the same way they did with the border wall, the same way they did with the travel ban, to try and paint this DHS policy as being driven by his xenophobia, by his racism. It's not real. They're inventing that. You just listen to what he said. At no point did he say anything xenophobic or racist. But that is what the media does. That's what the left does. They try and twist your words to use for their own agenda.
And his wife is a foreigner. I mean, was foreign born, right? She's an American, but she was foreign born. It doesn't make any sense. People just can't even get it through their mind that what the left is doing is just trying to poison the well. It's just trying to poison your water supply. It's trying to poison who you are as a society. You know, I was online there. We have Nay wrote that we can't even celebrate our own holidays, right? Without getting flack for it. We can't have July 4th. We can't have just stuff that we celebrate as a country. No positivity can come out of our country.
We can't have national security regulations designed to stop another 9/11, because that's what this is.
But look at what they're doing. They're literally eroding. This goes back to my point that these are foreign interests. These are people that don't understand heritage or history in this country. They come here to destroy the fiber of everything we represent. And Omar, whatever her name is, Alphabet, literally came out and said, okay, not only do we want to defund and destroy the police infrastructure, we now want to destroy the free market. I mean, does anybody even realize?
Our political system.
Does anybody even realize where she came from?
Yeah. She came from Somalia. But that's an interesting point, because when she was sworn in to the United States Congress, she swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution.
She should resign.
We now have her on camera advocating tearing down our political system.
She should be kicked. She should be impeached. Get her out.
That is a clear violation of that oath that she swore. You can't swear to uphold the Constitution and also advocate tearing it apart. I know that we talk about, like, when someone promotes a gun control bill, we talk about that as a violation of their oath, because yes, they swore to uphold the Second Amendment. They obviously aren't, right? But this is as literal as it gets. She swore to uphold the Constitution, and she's on camera advocating tearing the whole system apart. It's not interpretive. She said it. It happened. She violated her oath.
So she violated her oath, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to do nothing, because the loony left does not care about protecting our society. They don't care about our country. These are foreign interests that have infiltrated every part of our society. They are cancers to our society, and I'm going to tell you something. There's going to be blood on a lot of people's hands, because the American people are waking up. So, Max, I don't know if you heard about what happened yesterday. Did I tell you what happened yesterday? I don't think I told anyone here. So I had to go downtown.
No.
So I had to go downtown Denver, right? And as I'm walking out, and obviously I'm walking out of the building, I had to meet with a client, and I get accosted by this guy. So this black guy walks up, and he says to me, hey, white M, he said some choice words to me. I can't say it on here,
words that we don't want to say.
And then he said, where are my reparations? He starts yelling at me and screaming in my face, where are my reparations? So I started laughing at him. I'm like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. Oh, you want reparations? Oh, you want a paycheck? Hey, go get a job. I said, go get a job. Start there. And he continued to follow me down the deal. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I'm going to tell you that the reason why he didn't get arrested is because I actually I told the police that, hey, you don't need to arrest him, right? No, just leave him alone. But what happened in between that was he got in my face. And so this is me literally walking out of a building. Now, if it happens to me walking out of a building, how many other people does this person terrorize downtown?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he's probably panhandling, trying to use race apologism, like white privilege and all that, trying to use that to get a handout. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah.
He was obviously asking for money, but doing it in a very racially charged way.
Yeah.
No, it's happening. It's happening all over our society.
But they're creating this. They're creating this division. They're creating this tension in our society on purpose, and it is coming from foreign interests. It is coming from foreign interests. It is coming from people that are not Americans. And even those that are Americans here, that really aren't American. I mean, they're American by the fact that they have citizenship here, but they're not Americans. Yeah. They're not Americans. These are not Americans.
Literally in this case, we are talking about non-Americans trying to pressure the government into letting them stay just to hang out.
Yeah,
this is literally an example of that. There are American citizens who are doing it because they're being pressured, but these are literally foreign students who do not have any legal right to be here except to attend in-person classes.
Right.
That's literally what their visa says. It's not the federal government's fault that their classes are canceled. It's their school's fault. Now, what's interesting is Larry wrote in on our Facebook comments. He says he's a Canadian. He went to Cornell in '82. And he says, I recently returned to witness the campus infiltrated by roughly 60% Chinese nationals. It was explained to me that they bribed their way in by paying 3 times the tuition. I don't know, Larry, if they bribed their way in, but I do know that foreign students do not get any foreign aid. They don't get any discounts. They pay more than anyone else. And the argument that universities are putting out is saying, listen, we have to have these paying students so that Americans can pay less, which that might be a fine economic argument. The thing is that no one's taking away a Chinese national's ability to earn a degree. We're just saying that if it's online, you can't do it in the United States. Go back to China. Take your courses there. And then when they reopen courses, you have every right to come back under your visa. Right? It's not a permanent deportation. It would only become a deportation if they refuse to go back. So it's very interesting how this is all being portrayed. But I want to shift gears because this happened yesterday with Harvard announcing. It took less than a day for the universities to try and find a workaround for this, to try and find a technicality, a loophole for them to be able to keep their students in the U.S. even though they wouldn't actually be attending classes. Let's throw up, Mr. Producer, image number 4. This is from a Fox News article. Berkeley students planning fraudulent course to circumvent ICE rules and avoid deportations. Let's also now throw up image number 1. So basically what they're saying to do is that courses would not be in person, but instead they would add like a 1 credit class, not multiple people in it, but every student has his own 1 credit class where he shows up, steps inside of a room briefly, class is canceled, and that counts as in-person classes. So they're trying to devise a system to defraud the federal government. They're trying to find a way to let someone show up once a week for a class to be able to mark them present so that they don't have to report to the government the person's absent. The problem with that is when it's a once-a-week class, that leaves you 6 other days in the week where nobody knows what that foreign student's doing. And no one's saying that all these people are bad. No one's saying that they need 24/7 surveillance or anything, right? I know plenty of foreign students who are very nice people, and I'm glad that they were able to be here. Otherwise, I never would have met them, right? But there's a reason for the in-person requirement so that when you show up every day, your attendance is marked. And if you stop showing up a couple days in a row, the schools are supposed to notify the government that you're not there, you're AWOL. And that sets off a whole other procedure to try and figure out where that person is because they don't have a right to be in the country for any right other to classes. So that's what they're trying to do. And let's throw up image number 5. It's not just Berkeley that's doing this. Columbia and NYU are also creating a 1 credit in-person global course for all international students to register so they can't be deported by ICE. And this person on Twitter says it's absolutely iconic.
Yeah.
This is fraud. This is universities committing fraud, trying to game the system to basically fill their own pockets at the expense of our nation's national security. The universities know exactly why these reporting requirements are in place. They understand exactly why the in-person attendance requirements are in place. They're trying to circumvent that by gaming the system so that they can continue to pad their pockets.
Correct.
It's disgusting. It's criminal.
Correct.
And the Trump administration should absolutely go after these universities for it because they are defrauding not just the Department of Homeland Security, they're defrauding the American people. Is there any other way to describe that, Joe?
No. No, it's not. And I don't know how anyone on the left can actually say that we're just sticking it to the man when you're actually just making people in your environment unsafe. How?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I don't know. They're making the claim that this is for public health, and that as a result we need to relax our national security regulations. It just doesn't make sense. I was doing some research, and there's some research that was put out by the Cato Institute, which is a right-leaning think tank. They went through the data, and they looked from 1975 to 2017, and they looked at all of the foreign-born terrorists who committed terrorist attacks and injured someone on U.S. soil. And they had numbers for before 9/11, during 9/11, and obviously after 9/11. If you go through 1975 to 2017, 11.5% of all terrorists who successfully, at the very least, injured someone on U.S. soil were students, foreign students on student visas. 11.5%. Now, the actual body count of that is higher because, as I mentioned, the hijacker on Flight 77, who literally piloted the plane into the Pentagon, was a foreign student on a student visa. So that one case does skew the numbers a little bit. But there are plenty of foreign students who get picked up because we realize that they're actually terrorists. I want to play this clip, and then I'll get your reaction to it, Joe. This is from 2019, I believe. It was a arrest. I think it was in Pennsylvania, that only happened because the school was monitoring the student and reported him to DHS when they noticed something was off. Let's go to cut 5.
A man attending classes at Mount Aloysius College in Cambria County has been charged with hiding his involvement in an armed anti-American militant group so he could get a government-issued student visa.
6 News investigative reporter Crispin Havener has been following this story. What do we know tonight, Crispin?
The criminal complaint alleges he made false statements to the Department of Homeland Security about his background and training. The documents say that group wished death upon the United States and Israel and victory to Islam. Ghaffar Mohammed Ibrahim Al-Wazir was arraigned in Johnstown Thursday after a more than 3-year investigation. According to his federal affidavit, Drexel University alerted the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force about this Facebook post on his account, allegedly showing him in military garb, holding an automatic rifle, in that, quote, he hates all Americans, death to all Americans, especially Jews.
So that is a case from last year in Pennsylvania where the school was doing their due diligence. Not only were they marking his attendance, but they were also monitoring his social media, which they didn't technically have to do, but I guess somehow they got wind of it. They reported him to DHS, and DHS was able to get him before he launched an attack. So when I say that 11.5% of foreign terrorists that at least injured someone on U.S. soil in the last 43 years were foreign students, that doesn't include the people that we've caught before they were able to carry out their attack. What do you think of this, Joe?
I think that nobody wants to pay attention to what I said before, that there are foreign interests that are coming into our country, infiltrating our society. They're getting into our education systems. They've weaponized our education system. They've weaponized technology. They're allowing these foreign interests to actually creep into and erode what we have as a society, as in the United States. And it's so blatantly obvious to anyone that's even paying attention that you can't get attacked on this many fronts and have this many things happening that are basically trying to strip our history, take away our statues, rewrite history and use this revisionism to actually create an environment where the United States no longer is what the United States is. It doesn't even stand for the same thing. I mean, they are literally rewriting everything about our country, and we're watching it happen, and none of you are actually getting out there and doing anything about it. You're not speaking up. And if we don't start speaking up, and if people don't start speaking up more harshly about what's happening, they're literally going to steal our society from us, and we're going to be talking about a segregated society with a caste system where only the 1% has money. The rest of the world is going to be broke and poor. We're going to be a Venezuela, a Somalia. We're literally the last standing experiment.
Yeah, we are.
This is... I cannot even tell you that the whole world is laughing at us, except for those people that are trying to destroy us. I talked about Kaepernick and the fact that his girlfriend...
They're licking their lips.
Yeah, and we're letting it happen. And I'm telling you, there's a large group of people. There's a large group of people right now that are saying, forget it. We're gonna fight back. There are militias that are being actually created, right? That are going to fight against this idea that somewhere I owe somebody something for something that happened.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that because there's no militia forming to defend this regulation. We can talk about that in another episode. No one's going to be marching into Harvard Yard to basically stop Harvard to stop Harvard from like defrauding the government with BS classes that don't actually exist, right? That's not going to happen here. But it is part of this overall theme where the way when you listen to how people are talking about this, they're talking about these foreign students as if they're immigrants, which is a very important thing to point out, because if you are in the country on an F1 visa, you are not an immigrant. You have no right to reside here permanently. You have no right to work here. You are only here to attend classes. You can go on vacations. You can visit friends. You still have to notify the government where you're going, right? You're not here as an immigrant. You're just here as a visitor, as a student. Just like someone on vacation in the United States is not an immigrant, right? They're here on a vacation visa. Someone here on business for a business meeting is not an immigrant. But they're trying to brand this. They do this with Trump all the time when he goes after Rosie O'Donnell and he says she's a pig. What does the headline say? Trump calls woman a pig. They reduce it to the lowest common denominator to try and make it as offensive for the largest possible group. When Trump condemns illegal aliens, the media says he condemns immigrants. Right? We see this all the time, right? We see this all the time. When Trump condemns rioters and looters, the media says that Trump condemns peaceful protesters. They do this all the time with everything he does. It's no surprise that they're doing it again now, trying to basically claim that he's against immigrants. And I want to mention this on Facebook. We set up a poll. Should foreign students be allowed to stay in the U.S. if they aren't actually taking classes? 92% of you said no. 8% said yes. I'd be interested to know why people say yes. So if you said yes to that poll, call us in. We're not going to yell at you. I'm interested to know the reasoning. Call in 888-441-1121.
The 8% is going to be the commie mommies and the Jasons of the world from yesterday.
I'm interested. I'm interested because if you have a student visa and the student visa lets you into the country to go to classes, but there are no classes, why should the person be allowed to stay? If someone can have a legitimate explanation for that, when they've been kicked out of their dorm, they've been kicked off the meal plan, right? They're not allowed in class. They're not allowed on campus. You're basically just going to have a million people that are just able to do whatever they want to do. Does no one see that that's a problem? Does no one see that that's a major security risk? That even if someone isn't already radicalized and hell-bent on committing harm to people, they might see that long leash as an opportunity to do so anyway, right? We just played that clip from Pennsylvania of Sherry says, Joe, now they won't call. We just had that clip of Pennsylvania where they caught someone before he had an attack just because of what he was saying on social media, right? There are people in this country who have already been radicalized. They're here to learn. And if given the opportunity, they'd be more than happy to carry out those radical beliefs.
100%.
That's not saying that all foreign students are terrorists. 100%. Not at all. But there are radicals in that group. Absolutely. And to say that we just need to let them all hang out in the United States for a year, I just don't see it.
And we become apologists for them. We become apologists. We want to say that, the U.S. is bad. They come over and say the U.S. is bad. They burn our flags. They do all that stuff. Max, they brought it here. They took this behavior over there. They started funding and giving organizations here money, acting like the victims, and then taking their message and muling it into our daily society. That has actually happened. That is truth. That is not conjecture. That is actually happening. And we're allowing it to happen. We're allowing people like Omar, whatever her name is, to get elected. We're allowing this to creep into our society like a cancer. And what do you do with cancers? You got to cut it out. And that's really what needs to happen.
You cut it out before it metastasizes. And that's not to say that we need to kick everyone out of the country because everyone in the country on a student visa is a cancer. That's not true at all. It's this belief that anyone in the world just has a right to come here. That's the cancer. That if there's no classes, we should just let 1 million foreign students just hang out and go wherever they want in the country. That idea is the cancer, not the people. That idea is a cancer that has been allowed to spread, because this is not the first time the left has tried to present to us that people have a right to enter the country. Now, I knew that you were going to talk about foreign influences, and that's why I wanted to bring up this topic.
Yeah, I mean,
we disagree on that issue a lot, but in this, it's very clear. I wanted to present, though, an example of how of pushback to the Trump administration that is completely homegrown. And what I mean by that is Native American pushback. Let's go to cut 2.
Joining me now is Ken Cuccinelli. He is the acting deputy secretary.
Sorry, image two, my mistake. Image 2. A Native American perspective. Elizabeth Warren kicking international students out of the U.S. during a global pandemic because their colleges are moving classes online for physical distancing hurts students. It's senseless, cruel, and xenophobic. ICE and DHS must stop this policy immediately. Now, Joe, I know obviously there's a lot of foreign interest involved here, but I wanted to at least put this up as a devil's advocate of a completely homegrown Native American
way
interest.
Native American.
Way Native American.
Yeah. 0.00001 Native American.
Well, no, she was on Harvard staff as their only minority woman person of color.
Yeah.
So this is a very organic American, Native American perspective. So I wanted to present that as a devil's advocate because with all of these foreign interests at play, it's important at times to say that sometimes there are real Native Americans who just oppose this as well.
Oh my gosh, my head hurts. my head hurts because we're having a discussion about something that should be common sense. I mean, we should not even be this shouldn't even be a story. This should be hey, listen, here's the rule. And by the way, in every nation out there, every nation that I've been to a lot of nations, every country out there, just so we're clear, you cannot stay if you're not going to school. You can't stay, right?
Or if you don't have a reason.
If you don't have a reason. And by the way, if you overstay your visas in some countries, most countries, you will go directly to jail, do not pass go, and they will deport you. And that will hurt your chances of ever getting back into that country, right? So I'm going to tell you that the U.S. is not unlike any other country. They just don't want us to have accountability because accountability leads to strength. And strength leads to the ability for American people to be safe. And they don't want American people to be safe. The foreign interests don't want American people to be safe, and neither do the loony lefts. They don't. They feel like that, hey, listen, I don't know if you saw this, but in San Francisco, they want to criminalize anyone that calls 911 on a person of color. Did you know that?
Yeah, I think we've already posted that on our Facebook page. If not, it's about to go out, but yeah.
It is it defies logic, and people literally you have conversations with people every single day and they literally are saying, Joe, but nobody can really believe this. They just think that they're just a bunch of clowns. No, they're believing it. Like young people are believing it. That's what you said yesterday about, patriotism going from 60% to 30%.
Yeah.
From 75% or 80% are proud to be an American down to 30 because they're using this indoctrination. This is foreign indoctrination. This is foreign interests. And they said, let me draw the lines collectively together, guys. See, we don't think that way. People of character don't think this way, so we can't fathom the idea that there are people out there with evil intent that are actually taking money from foreign interests. And you said it, Max, that these universities, they pay, sometimes twice what a student in the U.S. will pay. They do. Right? And so the universities are kowtowing to an idea that these foreign students, that they get paid money. They're getting paid to indoctrinate the rest of our society and talk about white privilege and the fact that there's black oppression and that all police officers are bad. I mean, I can just go down the line. I mean, our whole society is so bad. Then leave. Then take all your little leftist loonies and go to a country that's better than this one. Oh, no. We'd rather destroy it for you here. That's what we'd rather do. We'd rather destroy it for you.
Lots of people in the comment section. Sherry saying that she's 0.000000001 Native American. Can she go? Lynette says that she's a quarter Cherokee and she doesn't claim it. I'm between 1/16th and 1/32nd Lenape. And I don't claim it, but my son, it's on his birth certificate. I took that right from Elizabeth Warren. It doesn't. If she can claim it, then my son certainly can claim it. Here's the interesting thing. You mentioned about how other countries deal with this. And this is where I can actually have a little bit of a story time from my experience. So I studied abroad in Beirut in Lebanon. And during my study abroad experience, there was a gentleman, not going to use his name, but there's a gentleman, he was Turkish, from Turkey, studying in Lebanon in our program. One night he got very, very drunk, like belligerently drunk. We were ribbing on each other, joking. At some point, the joking for him got way too far. It offended his Turkish sensibilities. He then started getting violent, actually trying to kick in our door when we said, listen, we're leaving, we're going for the night. Actually tried to kick in our door to kill us. He got deported in 2011 to Syria. That's what the Lebanese government did. The minute that he was reported as being violent and drunk and belligerent and trying to hurt Americans at a study abroad program, he was apprehended and deported to Syria, not sent to the airport to get on his own flight. He was driven to the Syrian border and let go.
Wow.
That is what other countries do when you are on a student visa and you violate the terms of the visa. Now, I do think the fact that he was trying to kill a bunch of Americans probably weighed a little heavier on that decision from the Lebanese police or the Lebanese government. But they deported him to Syria, which anyone who knows what was going on in Syria in 2011 is not somewhere you wanted to be, like under any circumstance.
No.
So
I was in Syria
that's how
in
other
2011.
countries. That's how other countries deal with this kind of stuff. When you violate the terms of your visa, you have to go home. If the terms of your visa that allow your entry and stay in the country are no longer active, you have to go home. If a school goes bankrupt and closes, you have to go home, right? If the school gets hit by an asteroid, there's no more classes, you have to go home. It's not racist, it's not bigoted, it's not xenophobic. If you're here to study and you can't study, you got to go home.
Hey, Max,
It's
I don't know why
every country on earth does it.
I don't actually know why you got to talk logically. I mean, I would really appreciate if you'd stop right now, because your amount of logic is hurting my head and it's hurting my entitlement. And I really just feel like that I'm going to need somebody to help me. So I need somebody to talk me off the ledge, because I'm really upset. Sherry, you're good at talking me off the ledge. Talk me off the ledge, because I don't understand why you're.
Sherry said, Syria, yikes. Oh, let's do that here.
Hey, yeah.
Deport foreign students to Syria. Yeah, we don't want to be punitive, but no, that actually happened, and I was shocked when I learned that happened, because he was just drunk and belligerent. He wasn't like, he was trying to kill us. He said it, but he was pretty cuddly other than that. But I guess he just flipped. But yeah, that might be a policy recommendation for our country as well. That might make people think twice before overstaying their visas. It's crazy that we have to talk about this. It's crazy that we have to defend a post 9/11 national security policy.
Yep.
From charges of xenophobia and racism.
Yep.
Again, one of the 9/11 hijackers, whoever was watching now wasn't at the beginning. They entered the country on a student visa. We didn't know that they weren't attending classes. Instead, they were learning how to fly a plane, and the rest is history. That's why you have to be at in-person classes. Yeah. Because as you mentioned earlier, Joe, if this policy that the left wants was in place in 9/11, the guy, Hani Hanjour, would have been able to be taking online classes in the car, in the parking lot of the flight school in Arizona. Right. And the California school he was attending would be marking him present. That's the risk in all of this. Not saying that all the foreign students are bad, they're dangerous, not at all. But there's a reason that we have this, and there's a reason that foreign terrorist attacks from students have declined since 9/11. There's a reason for that, because this policy works. And to say that we have to do that, basically erase it, roll it back in the interest of political correctness, it's dangerous, and far more dangerous than holding classes during a pandemic, when there's a virus that 99.6% of people who get it survive. I'm far more worried about the national security implications. Any last words, Joe, as we wrap up today's episode?
Courage is as infectious as fear, but if you have courage and you sit on the couch and you don't do anything with it, you're likely to put yourself and the rest of the country in a bad place. And by the time you get up the courage to actually stand up and stand together, it'll be too late. So people need to understand that we're talking about logic for a reason. We're talking about the lack of sensibility from the left, because the left is cancerous. They're cancerous to our society. They're cancerous to the very fiber of who we are as Americans. So, look, you said I couldn't say this again. We had this discussion about what I think that the Democrats represent, but Democrats represent everything bad about our country.
Yeah, everything bad, sure.
Yeah,
we can go with that.
bad.
That's a safe thing to say. And I will agree, but slightly disagree with what you said. Fear and courage you're right, they are connected, but being courageous is not saying that you have no fear. It's being afraid but doing the right thing anyway.
Right.
So those are two faces on the same coin. Courage is being afraid but doing the right thing anyway. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. If you are on Parler and you want to follow us there, make sure you search for @Conservative Daily on Parler. We'll follow you back. So definitely hit us up there. You can also download the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you have an iPhone, Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. You can also find us on the Podbean app as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. We go live on YouTube and Facebook if you're listening to the audio. Check us out there. We have a nice little comment section. So check us out there if you only know us through the audio podcast. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand together.